The grand observation deck of the Arthean warship Dominance stretched before Gina, its transparent ceiling revealing the vast emptiness of space dotted with countless stars. She stood with her back straight, hands clasped behind her, watching as the ship approached the massive space station where the Galactic Coalition would host its annual diplomatic combat tournament. Gina's silver combat suit gleamed under the artificial lights, its surface embedded with subtle markers of her many victories, 6 emblems for 6 years of absolute domination. No opponent had lasted more than 3 minutes against her in the arena. The other species had given her a nickname that even her own people now used with pride. The Untouchable. A soft chime announced someone at her door. "Enter," Gina said without turning. Her aide Tai-Ho stepped inside, bowing slightly though she couldn't see it. "Commander Gina, the High Council requests your presence for the final briefing before docking." Gina nodded, finally turning to face him. Tai-Ho had served her for 3 years now, and she trusted his efficiency if not his combat skills. "Any updates on the competitors this year?" 23 species are participating, Tai-Ho reported, his eyes fixed on his data tablet. "Including, for the first time, humans." Gina raised an eyebrow. "Humans? Earth was only admitted to the Coalition last season." "Yes, Commander. Apparently, they qualified through some technicality about emerging civilizations." Gina snorted, walking toward the door. "This tournament grows more meaningless each cycle. Now we must waste time defeating primitive species barely capable of interstellar travel." The corridors of the Dominance were alive with activity as crew members prepared for docking. Everyone stood aside as Gina passed, offering respectful nods or salutes. She was not just any warrior. She was the living embodiment of Arthean superiority, proof that their species stood above all others in the galaxy. The council chamber was already full when Gina arrived. 5 elders sat at a curved table, their aged faces set in permanent expressions of stern judgment. They had all been warriors in their time, but now they served the Empire through politics rather than combat. "Commander Gina," Elder Q1 acknowledged her with a slight nod. "We were discussing the unusual situation this year." Gina took her seat at the table. "The humans." "Indeed." Elder Q1 activated a holographic display in the center of the table. The image showed a human male, average height by their standards, lean but muscular. "This is their champion, Han Bin, a military specialist with their global defense force." Gina studied the image with mild curiosity. Humans looked somewhat like Artheans, but smaller, weaker, with no The ship's announcement system interrupted her training. "Approaching final docking sequence. All personnel prepare for arrival." Gina stopped, breathing evenly despite the intensity of her workout. She walked to the viewport just as the massive space station came into view. Unity Station, they called it, a floating city where representatives from all Coalition species could meet on neutral ground. "Computer, display tournament bracket," Gina commanded. A holographic display appeared before her, showing the 23 competitors arranged in elimination format. Her first match would be against a Novan crystal being, a species she had defeated twice before. The human, Han Bin, was placed on the opposite side of the bracket. "So I won't face him until the finals," Gina murmured to herself, "if he even survives the first round." As the ship docked with a gentle shudder, Gina allowed herself a small smile. Another tournament, another victory for the Arthean Empire. The human would learn, as all others had, why they called her the Untouchable. What he and the rest of the galaxy didn't understand was that her title wasn't just about her skill in battle. It was about the unbridgeable gap between the Artheans and everyone else, a gap Gina embodied with every breath she took. She would show them all. Again. The Unity Station's grand reception hall buzzed with activity as delegates from 23 different species mingled. Floating light orbs changed colors slowly overhead, casting the diverse gathering in shifting hues. Gina stood apart from the crowd, her silver combat suit making her easy to spot among the colorful diplomatic attire worn by most attendees. Commander, the opening ceremony begins in 30 minutes, Taiho informed her, appearing at her side with a glass of blue liquid. Elder Q1 suggests you make some appearance of diplomatic effort beforehand. Gina accepted the drink without enthusiasm. Fine. Point out the human delegate. Taiho nodded toward the far side of the hall. There. As he walked away, Gina felt strangely unsatisfied with the encounter. She had meant to intimidate him, or at least gauge his confidence level. Instead, she found herself wondering what strategies he might employ against opponents who outmatched him in nearly every physical aspect. The opening ceremony proceeded with typical coalition pomp. Representatives from each species carried their planetary emblems in a circular procession around the central arena, where the tournament would take place. Gina carried the Arthean sunburst shield with practiced dignity, her movements precise and controlled. When Hanbin's turn came, Gina watched him carefully. He carried Earth's blue and green emblem with simple grace, his steps measured and efficient. No wasted energy, no unnecessary flourish. A soldier's discipline, not a diplomat's showmanship. Later, in the training facilities, Gina found herself observing the human again. Tournament rules allowed competitors to watch each other train, a tradition meant to promote transparency and reduce accusations of cheating. Hanbin had claimed a small corner of the facility. Unlike most competitors who practiced their most impressive techniques to intimidate others, he was performing what looked like simple stretching exercises. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost meditative. "What is he doing?" Taiho asked, joining Gina at the observation rail. "I'm not sure," Gina admitted. "It resembles some Arthean warm-up routines, but much slower." They watched as Hanbin transitioned to more active movements, quick punches and kicks executed in precise combinations, each flowing into the next. His technique was unusual, combining elements Gina recognized from several different combat styles. "He's adaptable," Gina noted reluctantly, "and creative with his approaches. Will that be enough against superior biology?" Taiho wondered. "No." Gina turned away from the railing. Creativity only goes so far against natural advantages. Later that evening, Gina reviewed footage of Hanbin's previous matches on Earth. There weren't many recordings available since humans were new to interstellar data sharing, but what she saw intrigued her despite herself. Hanbin fought differently in each match, adapting his style to counter each opponent's strengths. Against a larger, stronger opponent, he used leverage and momentum. Against a faster one, he controlled space and forced predictable approaches. He never seemed to panic or lose focus, even when taking hits that should have ended the match. A knock at her door interrupted her study. Gina closed the footage display. "Enter." Elder Myran stepped inside, her aged face serious. "Preparing for tomorrow, Commander." "Always, Elder," Gina replied, standing respectfully. Myran glanced at the now blank display. "The human interests you." It wasn't a question. Gina considered denying it, but knew the elder would see through the lie. "His techniques are unconventional, worth studying, though not concerning." Myran nodded slowly. "The Council received updated information today. This Hanbin has an unusual background. Before joining Earth's military, he trained in multiple combat disciplines from different regions of their planet. That explains the hybrid fighting style," Gina said. "Indeed." Myran fixed Gina with a penetrating stare. "Remember, Commander, that the greatest threat to supremacy is complacency. We remain dominant because we never underestimate even the weakest opponent." After the elder left, Gina returned to studying the footage. Tomorrow would bring the first matches of the tournament. Her position as defending champion meant she wouldn't compete until the second day, giving her time to observe the other fighters, including the human who had somehow managed to capture her attention with nothing but calm confidence and unusual techniques. For the first time in years, Gina felt something beyond her usual cool certainty of victory. Not doubt, never doubt, but perhaps a spark of curiosity about what this tournament might bring. The first day of the tournament transformed the central arena of Unity Station into a spectacle of light, sound, and athletic prowess. Spectators from across the coalition filled the circular stands, their excited chatter creating a constant background hum. Gina sat in the special section reserved for competitors, her posture perfect as she watched the matches with critical eyes. The Tauren and the human are next, Taiho informed her, checking the schedule on his datapad. Gina nodded without responding. She had been waiting for this match since the pairings were announced. The Tauren fighter, Vex X, was a formidable opponent with natural armor and strength that far exceeded human capabilities. It would be an excellent measure of Han Bin's true skill level. The arena floor shimmered as its surface reconfigured for the match. A simple circle appeared, 30 meters in diameter with a single boundary line. The rules were basic: defeat your opponent or force them out of the circle. Vexus entered first, his heavy footsteps echoing as his forelegs carried his massive upper body into the arena. His exoskeleton gleamed under the lights, plates of natural armor shifting as he moved. He stood nearly 2.5 meters tall, dwarfing his human opponent who entered moments later. Han Bin walked calmly to his starting position, wearing the same simple black uniform from the reception, though now without any decorative elements. He carried no weapons. Like all competitors, he would rely solely on his natural abilities. "This will be quick," commented a Praxian fighter seated nearby. "The human's bones will snap at first contact." Gina said nothing, her eyes fixed on Han Bin's relaxed stance. He showed no fear as he faced an opponent who could literally crush him with one blow. The match signal flashed, and Vex charged immediately, using his superior size and strength in a direct assault. Gina leaned forward slightly, expecting to see the human attempt to dodge. Instead, Han Bin stepped toward the charging Tauren, timing his movement perfectly to slip past the initial grab while using the back of his hand to tap one of Vex's leg joints. The touch seemed insignificant, but Gina noticed how the Tauren's rhythm faltered for just a moment. "Interesting," she murmured. "He's identifying weak points." For the next 3 minutes, the crowd watched in growing amazement as the human evaded every attempt to grapple him. Han Bin moved with fluid precision, never staying still, using minimal movements to maintain his position, while forcing the increasingly frustrated Tauren to expend energy in failed attacks. "He's tiring Vex out," Taiho observed, "but he hasn't made any offensive moves." "He is," Gina contradicted. "They're just too subtle for most to notice." She had seen what others missed. Each time Han Bin evaded an attack, he struck at the same leg joint, the pressure point building with each precisely targeted tap. It was a technique that required intimate knowledge of Tauren physiology and perfect control. Finally, after nearly 5 minutes, Vex lunged in frustration. Han Bin sidestepped, struck the weakened joint with focused force, and the massive Tauren stumbled, momentarily losing control of the leg. In that split second of imbalance, Han Bin pivoted and used his entire body weight in a leveraged push that sent the much larger opponent stumbling across the boundary line. The arena fell silent for a moment before erupting in surprised applause. Han Bin bowed respectfully to his defeated opponent, then to the judges, before walking calmly from the arena as if his victory over a physically superior species was entirely expected. That was. Taiho seemed at a loss for words. Calculated, Gina finished for him. He knew he couldn't match strength, so he exploited the one weakness in Tauren physiology: their joint control systems. She stood up. "I need to review the other matches." Throughout the day, Gina divided her attention between the ongoing matches and footage of Han Bin's victory. By evening, the first round was complete, with half the competitors eliminated. Her own first match would take place the following morning against a Novan crystal being. A challenging opponent for most, but one she had defeated twice before. In her quarters, Gina finalized her preparation routine. The door chimed unexpectedly. "Enter," she called, surprised to find Elder Q1 standing there. "Commander," he greeted her. "The Council wishes for an assessment of today's matches." Gina straightened. Most proceeded as expected. The Drakon fighter shows improved technique since last year. The Praxian relies too heavily on speed without strategic application. "And the human?" Elder Q1 asked directly. Gina considered her words carefully. "More skilled than anticipated. He demonstrates advanced understanding of xenophysiology and exploits weaknesses with precision. Is he a threat to your championship?" The question carried weight beyond simple curiosity. The Arthian Empire's status within the coalition was reinforced by her continued dominance in these tournaments. "No," Gina replied firmly. "His techniques are impressive against opponents who underestimate him. I will not make that mistake." The elder nodded, seemingly satisfied. "See that you don't. The Council has received reports that several species find the human success inspiring. It would be unfortunate if others began to question Arthian superiority." After Elder Q1 left, Gina returned to studying the MASH recordings. She found herself replaying moments of Hanbin's victory, noting details she had missed before. The way he controlled his breathing, how he maintained awareness of the boundary line without looking at it, his economy of movement. The next morning, Gina defeated her Novan opponent in just under 2 minutes, a respectable time that demonstrated her skill without appearing cruel. As she left the arena to moderate applause, she noticed Hanbin watching from the competitors section, his expression thoughtful. Their eyes met briefly across the distance. Gina had expected him to look away, intimidated by her dominant performance. Instead, he nodded slightly, an acknowledgement between warriors. The gesture carried neither fear nor arrogance, just simple respect. For some reason Gina couldn't name, that bothered her more than any challenge could have. The tournament continued through its second day. Hanbin defeated a Drakon fighter with the same methodical precision he had shown against the Tauren, adapting his techniques to counter his opponent's strengths. Gina advanced easily through her quarterfinal match against a Praxian whose speed proved inadequate against her combination of strength and tactical awareness. By the end of the day, only 4 competitors remained: Gina, Hanbin, a Makari combat specialist, and a Vortian telekinetic. The semifinal matches would pit Gina against the Makari, while Hanbin would face the Vortian, both challenging opponents who would test the limits of the human's adaptability. As Gina reviewed the day's results, a notification appeared on her datapad. The tournament brackets had been updated due to an injury to the Vortian during their quarterfinal victory. The semifinal pairings had been reshuffled. Gina would now face Hanbin directly. She stared at the screen for a long moment, a strange tension building in her chest. Not fear, never fear, but perhaps the first stirring of genuine anticipation she had felt in years. Tomorrow, she would discover exactly what this human was capable of. And she would show him, and everyone watching, why she remained untouchable. The aftermath of Gina's defeat spread through Unity Station like a shockwave. In the hours following the match, the Arthian delegation retreated to their quarters. Diplomatic meetings were hastily rescheduled, and speculation ran wild through the corridors. Some species openly celebrated what they saw as the fall of Arthian dominance, while others worried about the political implications of such an upset. Gina sat alone in her quarters, her silver combat suit exchanged for a simple gray tunic. She had dismissed Tahoe after his attempts at consolation had only worsened her mood. The defeat played in her mind on endless repeat, each moment where she could have acted differently, each assumption about human capabilities that had proven false. A message flashed on her communication panel. Elder Q1 requesting her presence at an emergency council meeting. Gina acknowledged it, but made no move to leave. For the first time in her career, she found herself reluctant to face her superiors. A soft chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. "I said no visitors," Gina called sharply. "It's Hanbin," came the reply, his voice calm and measured even through the door. "I can return later if you prefer." Jaina stared at the door in surprise. Protocol dictated that the victor and vanquished should not meet until the closing ceremony. Yet here was the human, breaking yet another expectation. "Enter," she said finally, curiosity overcoming her desire for solitude. The door slid open to reveal Hanbin, still in his black uniform, though he had added a simple blue band around his right arm. A traditional Earth symbol of respect for a worthy opponent, Jaina recalled from her research. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, remaining by the doorway. In his hands, he carried a small wooden box. "The council would say you are," Jaina replied, not rising from her seat. "But their opinion of proper behavior seems less relevant today." A small smile touched Hanbin's lips. "I thought you might want this back." He opened the box to reveal a small silver emblem, one of the victory markers from Jaina's combat suit that had detached during their match. Jaina stared at it. "You could have kept it as a trophy." "That's not why I fight," Hanbin said, placing the box on a small table near the door. "And I suspect it's not why you fight either." Jaina studied him with new interest. In defeat, she found herself seeing him more clearly than she had before. "Why did you come here, really?" "To witness my humiliation up close." Hanbin shook his head. "To thank you for the honor of facing you at your best. Few opponents push themselves to their limits against a human. You did." "I underestimated you," Jaina admitted, the words difficult but necessary, "as did our entire intelligence apparatus." "Underestimation goes both ways," Hanbin replied. "Your technique is extraordinary. With more accurate information about human physiology, the outcome might have been different." Jaina rose from her seat, approaching him with measured steps. "You knew, didn't you, that our data on humans was flawed?" Hanbin nodded. "Earth's delegation received copies of Coalition species assessments when we joined. The file on humans was incomplete, and you chose not to correct it. It wasn't a question. In diplomacy as in combat, information asymmetry can be an advantage," Hanbin said simply. "Earth is new to the Coalition. We need every edge we can find." A short laugh escaped Jaina, surprising them both. "The Council will be furious. They'll demand updated physiological data as a condition of continued diplomatic relations." "Which we'll provide," Hanbin agreed. "Now that we've made our point. That humans are stronger than we thought. That no species should be dismissed based on assumptions," Hanbin corrected gently. They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken respect. Jaina found herself reassessing not just the human before her, but her entire understanding of the Coalition's power structure. "The final match is tomorrow," Jaina said at last. "The Makari fighter is skilled." "Any advice?" Hanbin asked, his tone light, but his eyes serious. Jaina considered the question. Protocol and pride suggested she should refuse. Instead, she found herself saying, "Their neural pathways are concentrated along the dorsal ridge. Most species target the central mass, which is heavily armored." Hanbin's eyebrows rose slightly at this unexpected help. "Thank you." Another chime sounded, her reminder for the council meeting. "I must go face my superiors," Jaina said, straightening her tunic. "They will want explanations I'm not sure I have." Hanbin stepped back toward the door. "What will you tell them?" Jaina considered this as she gathered her formal insignia. "The truth. That the galaxy is more complex than we believed. That strength takes many forms." "They won't be pleased." "No," Jaina agreed. "But they need to hear it. The Arthian Empire has grown complacent. Perhaps this defeat will be valuable in ways victory never could have been." As they walked together to the corridor junction where their paths would separate, Jaina felt a strange lightness replacing the heavy shame of defeat. For 6 years, she had carried the weight of Arthian supremacy on her shoulders. Now, paradoxically, losing that burden felt like freedom. "One question before you go," Jaina said, stopping at the junction. "During our match, you could have forced me out of bounds several times earlier. Why wait?" Han Bin's expression turned serious, because the victory needed to be clear, not just for you, but for everyone watching. A narrow win could be dismissed as luck. I needed to demonstrate the humans deserve their place in the coalition. Gina nodded slowly. A tactical decision with diplomatic implications. Perhaps you understand interspecies politics better than we gave you credit for. Earth has had its own practice with diverse cultures and power imbalances, Han Bin replied. The principles scale up surprisingly well to interstellar relations. They parted with a formal bow, equals now in a way that would have seemed impossible just days before. As Gina continued toward the council chamber, she realized that the human had given her something unexpected through defeat, a new perspective. The Arthean council meeting was as difficult as Gina had anticipated. Elder Q1 spoke of diplomatic embarrassment, Elder Myran of strategic reassessment. For 2 hours, they debated the implications of a human victory over their champion. The balance of power within the coalition will shift, Elder Q1 warned. Other species will question our position. Perhaps they should, Gina said, earning shocked looks from the council. If our position depends on false assumptions about our superiority, it was always vulnerable. What do you suggest then, Commander? Elder Myran asked, her ancient eyes sharp with interest. Gina stood straight, her certainty growing with each word. We adapt. We learn. We form new alliances based on mutual respect rather than perceived dominance. Beginning with Earth. The humans. Elder Q1 scoffed. They barely understand interstellar politics. They understand enough to defeat me using both physical skill and information strategy, Gina countered. Imagine what our species might accomplish together rather than in competition. The debate continued late into the station's night cycle. By its end, no consensus had been reached except on one point. Gina would represent the Arthean Empire at the closing ceremony with full honors, defeat notwithstanding. The following day, Han Bin defeated the McCurry fighter in the final match, becoming the tournament champion. As tradition dictated, Gina presented the victory emblem, a simple platinum disc representing unity through honorable competition. As she placed it in his hands before representatives of 23 species, Gina spoke the traditional words with new understanding. Through challenge, we discover truth. Through truth, we find respect. Through respect, we build peace. Han Bin accepted the emblem with a deep bow. The honor is shared, he replied, adding a Earth phrase not part of the traditional exchange, as is the path forward. In that moment, standing before the assembled coalition, Gina realized that what had seemed like an ending to her championship, to Arthean dominance, was actually a beginning. A new chapter for herself, for her people, and for the complex web of relationships that bound the galaxy's diverse species together. She had believed herself untouchable until a human pinned her against the wall. Now she understood that true strength came not from being untouchable, but from being willing to reach out.